I died at 23 with a mouth full of crooked, yellowed teeth that made me cover my smile in every photo. I was reborn at 15, the day before my mother would cancel my long-awaited orthodontist appointment to pay for my sister Melissa's acrylic nail set. This time, I didn't cry. The morning light filtered through my childhood bedroom curtains, and I stared at the ceiling, my heart pounding as memories flooded back. 2 lives, 2 timelines, one brutal truth. My family had never loved me. In my first life, I'd spent years trying to earn their affection, sacrificing everything, and it had killed me, literally. I remembered it all now. Every slight, every stolen opportunity, every moment they chose Melissa over me. But I also remembered something else, how it ended. At 23, after years of dental problems left untreated, an infection spread. I'd been too poor to afford proper care, having given every penny to my family. I died alone in a county hospital while my mother and Melissa vacationed in Cancun on the money I'd earned. Now, lying in my teenage bed, I touched my teeth with my tongue. They were still crooked, still overlapping. The same teeth that would haunt me for 8 more years if I let history repeat itself. But this time, I had something I didn't have before: knowledge. And with knowledge came power. I heard my mother's voice downstairs, shrill and demanding. "Melissa, honey, we need to leave in 20 minutes for your nail appointment. The one where they're doing that new chrome finish you wanted." My door burst open without a knock. My mother, Patricia, stood there in her robe, her face already arranged in that expression of mild annoyance she reserved exclusively for me. "You need to call Dr. Morrison's office and cancel your appointment tomorrow." In my first life, I'd begged. I'd cried. I'd reminded her that I'd been waiting 6 months for this consultation, that my teeth hurt, that I could barely eat on the left side of my mouth. She'd slapped me for being selfish and told me that Melissa's senior year was important, that her nails needed to be perfect for prom season, even though prom was 5 months away. This time, I just looked at her and smiled, showing every crooked tooth. "Sure, Mom, I'll call them." She blinked, surprised by my compliance. A flicker of suspicion crossed her face, but the moment passed. "Good, don't forget. And clean the bathroom before you go to school. Melissa left it a mess, and I don't have time." I nodded, watching her leave. The moment my door closed, I pulled out my phone, the ancient flip phone they'd given me while Melissa got the newest iPhone. And I didn't call Dr. Morrison. Instead, I opened the Notes app and began to write. Everything I remembered, every betrayal, every theft, every moment that led to my death. The orthodontist appointment was just the beginning. Over the next 8 years in my first life, the pattern repeated endlessly. When I got a scholarship to community college, my mother had convinced me to defer so I could work full-time and help pay for Melissa's dream school, a private university where she lasted 1 semester before dropping out. When I'd saved enough for a used car, my father had borrowed it for Melissa and crashed it while she was drunk driving with her friends. They never replaced it. When I'd finally landed a good job at a marketing firm, they'd guilted me into renting a house big enough for all of us. I'd paid the mortgage while they lived rent-free. Melissa had thrown parties that damaged my credit. My mother had stolen my credit cards. My father had forged my signature on a loan. Every time I tried to escape, they pulled me back with tears and guilt and accusations that I was abandoning my family. And I'd believed them. I'd thought that if I just gave enough, sacrificed enough, they'd finally see my worth. They'd finally love me. They never did. But here's what I'd learned in those final, painful moments in the hospital, delirious with fever, my face swollen from the infection that started in a cracked molar I couldn't afford to fix. My family had always known exactly what they were doing. They'd systematically destroyed every opportunity I had because as long as I was struggling, I was useful. As long as I believed I was the problem, I'd keep giving. My death hadn't been an accident of circumstance. It had been the inevitable conclusion of their parasitic dependence. I looked down at my hands, 15 years old again, and I made a promise to myself. This time, I wouldn't be their victim. This time, I'd use every single thing I'd learned, every mistake I'd made, every opportunity I'd missed. I would save myself, even if it meant watching them destroy themselves in the process. The next morning, I got ready for school as usual, but with a crucial difference. Before leaving my room, I carefully documented the state of everything I owned. I took photos with my phone's terrible camera. I wrote down serial numbers. I created a digital paper trail. Then I went downstairs. Melissa was at the kitchen table scrolling through her phone, her current nails, already professionally done 2 weeks ago, on full display. She was 17, a senior, and beautiful in the way that came from having every advantage. Clear skin because she had access to dermatologists, shiny hair because she used expensive products, perfect teeth because she'd had braces at 12. She didn't look up when I entered. She never did. My mother was making Melissa's favorite breakfast, Belgian waffles with fresh berries and whipped cream. There was a bowl of plain oatmeal set out for me at the counter, not even at the table. "Did you cancel your appointment?" my mother asked without turning around. "I called the office," I said. It wasn't a lie. I had called. I'd called to confirm my appointment and explain that my family might try to cancel it, and that under no circumstances should they honor a cancellation from anyone but me. Dr. Morrison's receptionist, Nancy, had been confused, but understanding when I'd explained that I was estranged from my family and they were trying to sabotage my medical care. In this timeline, I'd learned that the truth told strategically was often more powerful than any lie. My mother made a satisfied noise. "Good. Melissa's appointment is at 3. The good salon, the one that charges $85 for a full set." I calculated quickly. In my first life, I'd learned that my orthodontic consultation would have cost $150 for the exam and x-rays, with a treatment plan of $4,500 paid over 18 months. My mother was canceling it for an $85 nail appointment that Melissa would ruin within 2 weeks by refusing to do any chores or be careful with her hands. "That's nice," I said, eating my oatmeal standing up. Melissa finally glanced at me. "You're not going to throw a fit?" I smiled at her, that same smile that showed all my crooked teeth. "Why would I? You're the one who matters in this family. I'm just the maid who pays rent." Her eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Enjoy your nails." I saw it happen in real time, the confusion, the suspicion, the slight fear. They were used to me fighting back just enough to be guilt-tripped into submission. Compliance without resistance unsettled them. It meant I was planning something or giving up entirely. Either way, they were losing control of the narrative. Good. At school, I did something I'd never done in my first life. I went to the counselor's office. Mrs. Chen had been at the school for 20 years. She'd seen everything, and in my first timeline, I'd avoided her because I'd been ashamed of my family situation. Now I knew better. Shame was a weapon they used against me, and I was done carrying it. "I need help," I told her, sitting in her office. "My family is financially abusing me, and I need to know my rights." She set down her pen, her expression shifting from routine counselor mode to serious concern. "Tell me everything?" So I did. I told her about the canceled medical appointments, the stolen money, the favoritism so extreme it bordered on neglect. I told her that I needed to protect myself, and I needed to know how. Mrs. Chen made notes, her lips pressed in a thin line. "You're 15. That makes this complicated. Are you in immediate physical danger?" "No, but I will be if I don't start protecting myself now. I just need to know. Can they force me to give them money? Can they cancel my medical appointments? Can they take things I buy with my own earnings?" She pulled out a folder. "Let's talk about emancipation, work permits, and financial protection for minors. And I think you should meet with our social worker, too." This conversation, this one meeting, was something I'd been too proud, too ashamed, too conditioned to have in my first life. Now I sat there and absorbed every piece of information like it was oxygen. By the time I left her office, I had a plan, a real plan, not just the vague hope that things would get better. The next day, I took the bus to Dr. Morrison's office after school. My mother thought I was at the library. Melissa's nails were freshly done, a gaudy chrome pink that she'd already chipped on one finger. Nancy recognized me and smiled warmly. "Your appointment is still on the books. Your mother did call to cancel, but as you warned us, we told her only you could make that decision for your own care." "What did she say?" "She was very angry, but we held firm. Dr. Morrison actually flagged your account. She wants to talk to you before the consultation." Dr. Morrison was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and steady hands. She sat me down in her office, not the exam room, and looked at me seriously. Nancy told me about your call. I want you to know that this office considers you our patient, not your parents. Your dental health is your right, but I have to ask, are you safe? I'd spent 8 years in my first life learning to lie about this, to minimize it, to make excuses, not anymore. I'm working on it, I said, but I need to know the truth about my teeth. How bad is it and how much will it really cost to fix? She nodded slowly. Let's find out. The x-rays confirmed what I already knew from living it once before. Severe crowding, an impacted wisdom tooth that would eventually get infected, a bite misalignment that was already causing jaw problems. Without treatment, I'd be looking at a lifetime of dental issues, pain, and eventually, as I'd learned, serious health complications. The treatment plan I'd recommend is comprehensive, Dr. Morrison said, showing me the images. Braces for 18 months, extraction of the wisdom tooth, possibly some tooth removal to make space. The total cost would be around $5,000, or we could do a payment plan of $300 a month. $300 a month. More than my mother spent on Melissa's nails every 2 weeks. I can't afford that right now, I said. But I will. How long can I wait before it becomes an emergency? She considered. A year, maybe 2 at most, but the longer you wait, the more complicated and expensive it becomes. And that wisdom tooth, we need to monitor it closely. I'll be back, I promised. I just need time to get my situation under control. She handed me a card. We have a hardship program. If you can document financial independence or prove that you're supporting yourself, we can work with you on pricing. Come back when you're ready. I took the card. In my first life, I'd never known this existed. I'd suffered for 8 years because I hadn't asked the right questions. That night, I got a job, not just any job. I found a position at a local coffee shop that catered to business professionals. It paid $12 an hour plus tips, and more importantly, it gave me access to a world I'd never entered in my first timeline. The manager, Sandra, was impressed by my interview. I'd spent 8 years working in customer service and marketing in my previous life. Even at 15, I knew how to present myself, how to speak with confidence, how to sell not just coffee, but an experience. You seem very mature for your age, she observed. I've had to be, I said, and left it at that. She hired me on the spot for weekend shifts and 3 evenings a week. It would mean less time at home, which was exactly what I wanted. When I told my family, the reaction was predictable. You got a job? My mother's voice was sharp with suspicion. Who's going to clean the house? Who's going to cook dinner? You and Melissa, I said simply. I'll still do my share on the days I'm not working. This is ridiculous. You're 15. You should be focusing on school? I am. I'll work around my school schedule, but I need money for things I want. What things? Melissa demanded. You never want anything. I smiled at her. I want to fix my teeth. Since we apparently can't afford my orthodontist, I'll pay for it myself. The silence that followed was delicious. They'd expected me to let it go, to accept their decision with quiet resentment. Instead, I'd found my own solution, which meant they couldn't use my teeth as a point of control anymore. That's years away, my mother said finally. You'll never save enough. Maybe, but at least I'll be trying. Over the next 6 months, I worked, I saved, and I watched. I watched as Melissa's nails grew longer and more elaborate, moving from $85 sets to $120 sets with rhinestones and designs. I watched as my mother bought her a new laptop when her old one was too slow, even though it was only a year old. I watched as my father took Melissa car shopping for her 18th birthday, despite the fact that she'd failed her driver's test twice. And I documented everything, every purchase, every expense, every time they bought Melissa something while telling me we couldn't afford necessities for me. I kept receipts, took photos, made notes. I was building a case, even though I didn't know yet exactly what I'd use it for. At work, I was learning more than just how to make lattes. I was networking. The coffee shop attracted wealthy professionals, lawyers, real estate agents, business owners. They'd come in every morning, and I'd make their drinks exactly how they liked them, remember their names, ask about their days. One regular customer was a woman named Diane Chen, no relation to my school counselor, who owned a successful marketing firm. She always ordered a vanilla oat milk latte and tipped well. "You're good at this," she told me one morning, gesturing at the busy shop I was managing single-handedly during a rush. "Better than good. You've got something most people don't learn until much later." "What's that?" "You make people feel seen. That's the core of good business." I smiled. I learned from experience. When you're invisible in your own home, you learn to notice when others feel that way. She studied me for a moment. "That's a heavy statement for someone your age." "I'm older than I look." She laughed, but something in her expression shifted. "I'm always looking for interns. If you're interested in marketing, come see me when you're a bit older. I think you'd be exceptional." She handed me a business card, and I felt a shiver of déjà vu. In my first life, I'd eventually ended up in marketing, but I'd clawed my way there with no connections, no mentors, and constant sabotage from my family. Now, at 15, I was already building the network I'd need. At home, things were escalating. Melissa had destroyed her laptop, the new one, by spilling an entire bottle of nail polish on the keyboard. My mother was livid, but not at Melissa. At the world, at their financial situation, at me for not contributing more to the household. "If you gave us some of what you're making, we could afford to replace it," my mother said, cornering me in the kitchen. "I make minimum wage at a coffee shop," I replied. "I'm saving for my dental work." "Your teeth can wait. Melissa needs a computer for school." "Then maybe Melissa should be more careful with expensive things. Or maybe she could get a job and buy her own." My mother's face turned red. "Don't you dare talk about your sister that way. She has more important things to do than work some menial job." "Like what? Get her nails done?" The slap came fast, but I'd been expecting it. I'd been slapped plenty of times in my first life, always when I pushed back, always when I suggested that Melissa should be held to the same standards as me. This time, I didn't cry. I just looked at my mother and touched my cheek where it stung. "That's assault," I said quietly, "against a minor." Her eyes widened. "Are you threatening me?" "No, I'm telling you a fact. If you hit me again, I'll report it." I walked away, leaving her stunned in the kitchen. Upstairs, I documented the incident. Date, time, location, what was said, what happened. I took a photo of my reddened cheek. I was building evidence piece by piece because I knew from experience that one day I'd need it. That night, I heard them arguing about me downstairs. "She's changed," my father said, "ever since that dentist thing." "She's being selfish," my mother replied, "thinking only about herself." "Maybe we should..." "Should what? Give her everything while Melissa gets nothing?" "Melissa is the one with potential. Melissa is the one who needs support." I lay in bed listening to them prioritize my sister over me, and I felt nothing. Not sadness, not anger, just a cold certainty. They would never change. They would take and take until there was nothing left of me, unless I stopped them first. By the time I turned 16, I'd saved $3,000. It had taken a year of constant work, of skipping meals to save money, of never buying anything for myself except absolute necessities. I'd also built relationships with several regular customers at the coffee shop who'd become something like mentors. Diane, the marketing executive, had started giving me small freelance projects, social media posts, content calendars, market research. It paid better than the coffee shop, and it was building skills I'd need. A lawyer named Marcus Reynolds had started coming in and had noticed my situation through careful observation and casual conversation. When I mentioned I was saving for dental work, he'd told me about medical financing options I didn't know existed. When I mentioned my family dynamics, he'd given me information about emancipation, trust accounts, and financial protection. And a dental hygienist named Sarah, who came in every Wednesday, had listened to my story and connected me with a different orthodontist who offered sliding scale payment for teenagers in difficult situations. I was building a life outside my family, a safety net they couldn't touch. At home, things had deteriorated. Melissa had graduated high school and was now supposedly attending community college, though she rarely went to class. My mother had stopped working entirely, claiming back problems, though she was fine when it came to shopping or going to Melissa's nail appointments. My father worked, but his salary barely covered the mortgage on the house he'd insisted on buying 5 years ago. They needed money, my money, and they were getting increasingly aggressive about it. "You need to contribute to the household," my father announced one night at dinner. "You're making decent money now between the coffee shop and whatever else you're doing. It's time you help support the family." "I'm 16, I said. "Legally, you're supposed to support me. We give you a roof over your head, food, the bare minimum required by law, and you'd give me less if you could." My mother stood up, her chair scraping. "How dare you? After everything we've sacrificed—" "What have you sacrificed?" I looked at each of them in turn. "Seriously, tell me, what have you sacrificed for me specifically?" Silence. "That's what I thought." I stood up too. "I'll pay rent when I turn 18 if I'm still here. Until then, legally, you have to house and feed me. I'm not giving you money to fund Melissa's lifestyle." "You're just jealous," Melissa sneered. "You've always been jealous that Mom and Dad love me more." I turned to her, and for the first time, I let her see exactly what I thought of her. "I'm not jealous, Melissa. I pity you. You're 19 years old, you have no skills, no work ethic, and no concept of reality. When they run out of money to fund your lifestyle, you're going to crash so hard, and I won't be here to catch you." Her face went pale, then red. "You bitch! Enough!" My father slammed his hand on the table. "You'll give us $500 a month or you can get out." I smiled. "I'm 16, you can't kick me out." "That's called abandonment, and it's illegal, but thank you for clarifying where we stand." I left the dining room, went to my room, and locked the door. Then I texted Marcus Reynolds, the lawyer, and asked for a consultation about emancipation. His response came within minutes. "Come to my office tomorrow. Bring documentation of everything." The next day, I laid out my entire case in Marcus's office. The documentation of favoritism, the canceled medical appointments, the demands for money, the physical violence. He reviewed everything with a grave expression. "This is a clear case of financial abuse and neglect," he said. "The physical assault strengthens the case. You're 16 now, which means in this state we can pursue emancipation if we can prove you're financially independent and have a safe living situation. I have money saved, I have a job, I just need to find a place to live." That's the tricky part. As a minor, most landlords won't rent to you, but there are options. Group homes, adult sponsors, foster care. No. I shook my head. I need to stay out of the system. I need complete control of my own finances and decisions. He nodded slowly. "There's another option. If you have an adult who's willing to act as your sponsor, not a guardian, but someone who vouches for you and provides a place to stay, we can make a case for emancipation based on constructive abandonment. Your parents are housing you, but they're not actually caring for you. There's precedent for this." "Who would sponsor me?" "That's what you need to figure out. Someone with stability, good character, who understands your situation." I thought about Diane, Sandra from the coffee shop, even Sarah, the dental hygienist. People who'd shown me more care in a year than my family had in 16 years. That week, I approached Sandra. We were closing the shop late one evening, and I'd been working there for over a year. She knew my situation, knew my work ethic, knew I was reliable. "I need to ask you something, and I understand if the answer is no," I said. "I'm pursuing emancipation from my parents. I need someone to provide a temporary living situation while I establish financial independence. It would be maybe 6 months, and I'd pay rent, help around the house, continue working. But I need someone who's willing to vouch for me legally." Sandra wiped down the counter, not looking at me. "That's a big ask." "I know, and if you say no, I understand. I can look into other options." But you're the first person I thought of because you've been kind to me, and I trust you. She turned to face me. You're 16 years old. You should be worried about homework and prom, not escaping an abusive home. I know, but that's not my reality. She sighed deeply. I have a spare room. My daughter moved out 2 years ago. I've been lonely, honestly. But I need to meet with your lawyer first. I need to understand exactly what I'm agreeing to legally. Of course. 2 weeks later, after meetings and consultations and background checks, Sandra officially agreed to be my sponsor. Marcus filed for emancipation, citing financial abuse, neglect, and one documented case of physical assault. Now came the hard part, telling my family. I chose a Sunday afternoon when everyone was home. I'd already moved most of my important possessions to Sandra's house in secret, my savings, my documents, my clothes, everything I cared about. What remained in my room at my parents' house was just stuff they'd bought me, things that had never really been mine. They were in the living room watching TV when I walked in and stood in front of the screen. I'm moving out, I said. I've filed for emancipation. The court date is in 3 weeks. The explosion was immediate and spectacular. My mother started screaming about betrayal. My father threatened to disown me as if he'd ever claimed me in the first place. Melissa called me every name she could think of. I stood there and let it wash over me, untouched. You can't do this, my mother finally said, her voice breaking. You're a child. You need us. I don't, I said simply. I never did. You made sure of that. We gave you everything. You gave me nothing. You housed me because the law required it. You fed me the minimum. You canceled my medical care for Melissa's manicures. You stole my money, my childhood. You made me believe I was worthless unless I was useful to you. That's not true, my father said, but his voice was weak. Isn't it? Tell me one thing you've done for me in the last year that wasn't legally required or that you didn't also do for Melissa. Tell me one time you chose me. One time you put my needs first. Silence. You can't, I said. Because you never have. Melissa was always the favorite. I was always the backup, the scapegoat, the ATM you could guilt into giving you whatever you wanted. But not anymore. You'll fail, Melissa hissed. You'll come crawling back, begging us to take you in. I smiled at her, genuine and pitying. No, I won't. Because I already know how this story ends. I've lived it. And this time I'm writing a different ending. They didn't understand that last part, but they would. I left that house and never went back except for the court hearing. The emancipation case was straightforward once all the evidence was presented. The canceled orthodontist appointment, verified by Dr. Morrison's office. The documented favoritism, dozens of receipts showing thousands spent on Melissa, nothing on me. The assault, photos, dates, my testimony, the financial demands, texts, and recordings I'd made. My mother tried to cry and play the victim. My father tried to claim I was lying. Melissa didn't even show up. The judge listened to everything, reviewed all the documentation, and then looked at me. You're 16 years old, she said. Are you absolutely certain you want this? Emancipation means you're completely responsible for yourself, no health. Insurance through your parents, no financial support, no safety net. Your Honor, I said, I've never had a safety net. I've been responsible for myself since I was old enough to understand that my parents weren't going to do it. The only difference now is that I won't have to pretend otherwise. She granted the emancipation. Just like that, I was free. The first thing I did was go to the orthodontist who offered sliding scale payment. With my emancipation papers, I qualified for her lowest tier. I started treatment within a month. Not traditional braces, but a clear aligner system that would take 2 years but cost half as much. The first time I put them in, I cried. Not from pain, but from relief. I was fixing the thing that had haunted me for 8 years in my previous life. I was taking care of myself in a way my family never had. At Sandra's house, I thrived. I paid rent, $400 a month, which was fair and manageable. I did my share of housework. I cooked dinner twice a week. We became something like family, the real kind, where people care about each other without keeping score. I continued working at the coffee shop and taking on freelance marketing projects from Diane. By the time I turned 17, I was making more than my father had at his regular job. I'd started building a portfolio, a reputation, a network, and I watched from a distance as my biological family imploded. Without me to subsidize them, their financial situation fell apart quickly. My father's salary couldn't cover the mortgage, the car payments, and Melissa's expenses. My mother had to go back to work. Melissa had to, horror of horrors, get a job. She lasted 3 days at a retail position before quitting because they expected her to actually work. She tried 5 more jobs over the next 6 months, quitting or getting fired from each one. My parents started fighting constantly, blaming each other for their situation, for how they'd raised Melissa, for their choices. The house went into foreclosure. They had to move to a small apartment. Melissa's expensive tastes couldn't be maintained. I heard all this through mutual acquaintances, people from school who were connected to my old life. I didn't reach out, I didn't gloat, I just let natural consequences do their work. Meanwhile, I was planning my revenge. Not the petty kind, but the thorough, systematic kind that would ensure they could never harm me again. I turned 18 2 weeks before I graduated high school. I'd finished my aligner treatment early. My teeth were straight, white, perfect. I smiled constantly now, not hiding anymore. I'd also finished high school a semester early and had already been accepted to a good state university on a full scholarship. Diane had offered me a full-time position at her firm after graduation, starting at $45,000 a year with benefits. It was more than my father made. At 18, but I wasn't done yet. I'd spent 2 years documenting every financial transaction my parents had made using my identity. Because that was the thing I'd discovered when I went through my credit report after emancipation. They'd been committing fraud. They'd opened credit cards in my name when I was 14. They'd taken out a personal loan using my information when I was 15. They'd ruined my credit score to fund their lifestyle and Melissa's wants. In my first life, I'd discovered this at 21 and had been too beaten down, too trained to accept abuse, to do anything about it. I'd just paid off the debt slowly, accepted it as another way they'd harmed me. This time, I pressed charges. Marcus helped me file the police report, identity theft, fraud, financial abuse of a minor. With my emancipation papers and all my documentation, the case was airtight. The police showed up at my parents' apartment on a Tuesday morning. They arrested both my parents. Melissa wasn't charged because she hadn't been the one to commit the fraud, but she also had no way to support herself without them. The trial was quick. My parents tried to claim they'd been helping me build credit. The prosecution showed that they'd maxed out the cards and defaulted on the loan, destroying my credit instead. They tried to claim I'd given permission. I showed that I'd been 14 and 15 when this happened and that I'd discovered it only after emancipation. They were convicted. My mother got 2 years, my father got 3. All their assets were seized to pay restitution, not that they had any assets left. Melissa called me after the sentencing. I almost didn't answer. "How could you?" she sobbed. "They're our parents. You sent them to prison." "They committed multiple felonies," I said calmly. "I just reported the crimes. The justice system sent them to prison." "We have nothing now. I have nothing. I don't even have a place to live." "You're 19, Melissa. You can work. You can support yourself." "I don't know how." "Then learn, like I did. Like I had to because no one ever taught me either, but I figured it out." "Please," she whispered. "Can I stay with you? Just until I get on my feet?" "No." "But I'm your sister." "You were never my sister. You were my competition, my replacement, the golden child who got everything while I got nothing. You watched them abuse me for years, and you didn't just stay silent. You participated. You told me I deserved it. You called me worthless. So no, Melissa, you can't stay with me. You can't have my money, my help, or my sympathy." "You're a monster," she spat, her sadness turning to rage. "You destroyed our family." "I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped letting you destroy me. There's a difference." I hung up. I heard later that Melissa had to move in with a friend, then another friend, couch surfing because she couldn't hold down a job or pay rent. Eventually, she moved to a different state, following some boyfriend. I didn't keep track after that. My parents served their time. When they got out, they tried to contact me. Letters, emails, showing up at my workplace. I had a restraining order filed within a week. By then, I was 21. I'd graduated from college with a degree in marketing and a minor in business. I was working at a major firm in the city making six figures. I'd bought a condo, I had a car, I had savings, I had good credit. After the conviction, the fraudulent accounts had been removed from my record. I also had perfect teeth. I'd gotten veneers on my own dime, the finishing touch on the smile I'd been denied in my first life. Every time I looked in the mirror, every time I smiled without hiding, I thought about that canceled orthodontist appointment, about my mother choosing Melissa's nail set over my medical care. And I smiled wider because I'd won. Completely, totally, definitively. Sandra, my former sponsor and now my chosen family, threw me a party for my college graduation. Diane was there, along with Marcus, Sarah the dental hygienist, and a dozen other people who'd helped me along the way. These were my people, my real family, the ones who'd chosen to care about me without conditions. We didn't talk about my biological family. They were irrelevant to this celebration, to this life I'd built. But later, when I was alone in my beautiful condo, I pulled out an old photo from my first life. It was the last picture taken of me before I died. 23, exhausted, with a swollen face from the dental infection, hollow eyes from years of being used. I looked at that girl and I felt such tenderness for her. She'd suffered so much. She'd tried so hard. She'd believed that love had to be earned, that family meant sacrifice, that she was the problem. She'd been wrong about all of it, but she'd also given me a gift, the knowledge to live differently. I put the photo away. It was from a life that no longer existed, a timeline I'd erased through sheer force of will and strategic planning. Now I looked at my reflection in the window, 21, successful, healthy, smiling with perfect teeth. Free. I'd been reborn once, physically, but I'd been reborn again through choice, through action, through refusing to accept the role they'd assigned me. Some people might say I was too harsh, that I should have forgiven them, that family is everything, but those people had never died at 23 from complications of a dental infection because they'd spent their whole life giving everything to a family that saw them as an ATM. Those people had never been reborn with the knowledge of exactly how much suffering could be prevented by simply saying no. I checked my phone. I had an email from Diane about a promotion, a text from Sandra asking about dinner tomorrow, a message from a guy I'd been dating, someone kind and stable who respected me. My life was full of people who chose to be in it and who I chose in return. No guilt, no obligation, no abuse disguised as love. Years later, I was 25 and getting ready for bed when I got a Facebook message from an account I didn't recognize. Curiosity made me open it. It was from Melissa. "I'm getting married," the message read. I wanted you to know I also wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. I understand now what they did to you, what I participated in. I've been in therapy for 2 years. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that I see it now, and I'm sorry. I read it twice, looking for manipulation, for hidden requests, for the trap. There wasn't one. It was just an apology. I thought about responding, about accepting the apology, maybe even rebuilding some kind of relationship. That would be the generous thing, the bigger person thing. Instead, I deleted the message. Not out of cruelty, but out of self-preservation. Melissa might have changed, might be genuinely sorry, but I didn't owe her forgiveness. I didn't owe her anything. The life I'd built was built on boundaries, on protecting myself first, on choosing very carefully who got access to me. She wasn't on that list, and she never would be. I looked at my engagement ring. I'd said yes 3 months ago to a man who treated me like I was precious, who'd never once made me feel like I had to earn his love. We were planning a small wedding, just close friends and chosen family. Sandra would walk me down the aisle. My biological family wouldn't even know it was happening. They weren't invited to any part of my life. That was my revenge, in the end. Not their imprisonment, though justice had been satisfying. Not their financial ruin, though that was consequence they'd earned. My revenge was my happiness, my success, my perfect teeth and my perfect life and my perfect freedom. I'd let them cancel my dentist appointment for Melissa's nails. I'd watch them make that choice, knowing I'd get veneers on my own dime one day. And I had. Beautiful, perfect veneers that I'd paid for with money I'd earned through work they'd said was beneath me. Every time I smiled, which was often now, I thought about that. About how they'd tried to keep me small and broken, and I'd become large and whole instead. Some stories are about forgiveness and reconciliation. This wasn't one of those stories. This was a story about a girl who died from the consequences of her family's abuse, got a second chance, and used it to save herself. Who learned that sometimes the only way to win is to refuse to play their game. Who understood that the best revenge isn't hurting the people who hurt you, it's building a life so good that they become completely irrelevant to it. I turned off my phone and went to sleep in my expensive bed in my paid-off condo next to the man I loved, with perfect teeth and zero regrets. That canceled dentist appointment had been the best thing that ever happened to me. Not because I'd needed my family to fail me, I hadn't, but because their failure had been so clear, so documented, so perfect, that it had given me the evidence I needed to walk away completely. They'd shown me exactly who they were, and I'd believed them. More importantly, I'd acted on that belief. And now, at 25, with a career I loved, a man I was going to marry, a chosen family that actually cared about me, and a smile that showed perfect teeth I'd paid for myself, I could honestly say I was grateful. Not for what they'd done to me, but for what their abuse had taught me, that I was strong enough to save myself, that I deserved better, that family isn't about blood, it's about love, respect, and choice. They'd tried to break me. Instead, they'd forged me into someone unbreakable. And that was the most satisfying revenge of all.